All right. Welcome to episode 324 of the Comic Watchers. I'm Chad. My co host Matt will hopefully be joining us here in a bit. And we're, I don't know what's okay. There we are. I don't know why it's like clicking on and off, but our guest is John Holland, who, if you uh, followed my other channel, then I've talked to John a couple of times when he's been doing some other campaigns, and we've talked about the books and his career. But hopefully, there's new people watching this, so I'll stop blabbing and let John introduce himself.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. I'm a comic book writer. I've been writing comics for probably since like the 80s. Worked with a lot of indie publishers at that time: Fantagraphics, Caliber, Kitchen Sink, Innovation. I worked with Sam Keith back before he became working for Marvel and DC. We did I think 5 short stories together. Throughout, some of the like Death Rattle and a few other titles. Working now, I've done some work with Antarctica Press. I just signed a contract with Source Point Press, and I'm still doing a lot of stuff under my own imprint, Diebold Comics.
Well, we love ourselves some Source Point Press here, and Diebold too. Like I said, we've talked a couple times over the years, but again, for maybe people who haven't watched seen one of our interviews, why don't you kind of take us through to start off with your experience as a comic book reader that led to writing comics?
Well, I've always read, since I was probably like 4 or 5 years old. I mean, I always remember reading. I don't remember a time when I wasn't reading something. I'm one of those people that will read the back of a cereal box if I have it in front of me. So I was reading like books, Dr. Zeus and other books, when I was a kid. I also started picking up comics like Three Musketeers, Casper. DC Batman. I remember reading like the 100-page Giants, from DC Comics. Then I got into Marvel for a few years and basically became a Marvel zombie. And for a while, that's about pretty much all I read. First Marvel comic I really remember reading was Daredevil 50, and it's and I don't know why that book got me into Marvel. Probably one of the worst issues of Daredevil. It's it was the villain of it was Star Saxon, who was probably somebody nobody ever remembers. Barry Smith actually was one of his first comics for Marvel Comics at the time, and his style was a lot different than what it later evolved into. It was a lot more reminiscent of Jack Kirby at that time. But overall, the book wasn't all that great. But some reason, I got fascinated with Daredevil and continued to read it, and Daredevil got a lot better real quick. And then it got into like all the Marvel comics, and from there, once the direct market started and all the new indie publishers came out, like First Comics and Pacific Comics and Eclipse Comics, I kind of stopped reading. I kept reading Marvel, but I started reading other comic publishers at the time. I was a real big reader of all the indie guys at that time. Eclipse and First and Pacific and all those different publishers, Renegade publishers, and that's when I started writing too. Was around that time too, when all those publishers started, and then when the black and white boom started, I started getting more work from a lot of indie publishers.
So, what is it about the comic books that made you want to write your own?
I think like I said, probably was the Marvel comics at the time. And besides just comics wanting me to write, it was I was a big science fiction reader too, and one of my favorite writers was Harlan Ellison, who was a short story writer. And, he's not as well known today. As many known in print, but at the time he was like one of the biggest science fiction short story writers. Probably, I think he won more Hugos and other awards than almost any other writer. And his stories, he would write introductions to his stories, and sometimes his introductions were longer than the stories. But he would always talk about, where he got the ideas from and how he wrote it, and just basically a lot of what was going on in his life at the time. And that just fascinated me, and I became, and it kind of opened up a window on the other side of what a writer really is. And I've always wanted to write since I was probably in high school, and I tried to write science fiction for a while, but then I've been a big fan of comics, so of course that was something I wanted to write too.
So I know the last time we spoke, you were running a campaign on Zoop, and how did that work out? And what what were your takeaways from that?
The Zoop campaign didn't do very well. Some of these, right now I have another crowdfunder. It's on Fund My Comics, and so it's basically I kind of just migrated the campaign from Zoop over to Fund My Comics. But some of these smaller crowdfunders, it's just hard because Kickstarter has such a built-in fan base. They have so many people already, just visiting it. Right now, I have the Diebold Comics digital library on Fund My Comics, and just trying to get some traction on it. But Zoop didn't do too well. Right now, it's really the Fund My Comics isn't doing all that great either. I've got plans for a Kickstarter coming up that really was supposed to start like next week, but we've had some issues that we're going to probably have to push it back maybe a month, maybe 2 months before we can launch it. But we still, I think I'm going to use Kickstarter once we get everything settled with the issues we have. We'll be debuting on Kickstarter, and probably I'll stick with Kickstarter because Kickstarter just has so many more people just looking at the sites on it, and unfortunately, Fund My Comics and Zoop just aren't as big yet.
So I've never. This is the first I've heard of Fund My Comic. Tell us a little bit about the platform and how it kind of differs from.
It's not a whole lot. I mean, I think all of them are pretty similar. It's fairly similar to like Kickstarter. I found though Fund My Comics actually creating the page and the site was probably the easiest of any of the sites I've worked on. It was just very easy to just make the page and get it ready to go. Then some of the other pages are just they've got hoops you have to jump through, or you have to do this, and sometimes they're a little more difficult. I actually tried to do an Indiegogo, and maybe I'm dumb, but I could not even get that thing set up. I was just having so much trouble that I just gave up on it. So Fund My Comics, was really easy to set up, and I like it, but I just, like I said, we're not getting a lot of eyes on it yet, I don't think, and I just don't know. I just don't think they have the reach that Kickstarter does.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. So, what are you offering the same digital package you were offering on Zoop, and kind of why don't we go through the books there?
Yeah, we've got the same books that we had on Zoop for this one. I see your shirt. Is that for the Abbott brothers?
Yep.
Oh, cool. I like them. But so it's the same books that we had on Zoop, but I changed the bundles a little bit. I actually have a everything bundle where basically you get all the single issues, you get the trades, for one price. For $50, you get like the 16 single issues and the 3 trades, which if you add everything up, all the issues, that comes to about $1.85 for a comic. So it's a really good deal, I think, if somebody just wanted to get everything. For $50, you get all of it. But the single issues are still $5. The trades are $10. So I think it's a really good price. For the trade, for the single issues, the trades are at least 4 issues of a trade, so they're $10. So you're really getting a good deal on those also.
Now, what are some of the books that you're offering? Because I saw Alma, which is your kind of the grandmother, Buffy the Vampire Slayer homage.
Alma is there. Alma is What If Buffy Was a 72-year-old grandmother. That's also that's on there. A Girl and Her Dog is being offered. That's the book that Tony Isabella, creator of Black Lightning, called one of the best books of the year when it came out. I've got a short story collection, Snapshots. It's 64 pages, and it collects all the short comic stories that I've written over the years. It's actually got 5 stories in there by Sam Keith, some of his earliest work, and 4 of them have been reprinted in Fantagraphics I Before E, which I think that's out of print at the moment also. But the 5th story that's by Sam on there, I don't think. Somebody could come up with something and prove me wrong, but I don't think the 5th story's ever been reprinted anywhere else but in Snapshots. It's actually penciled by Dave Garcia, who created PandaCon, and inked by Sam. So it's got 4 stories, that were in Kitchen Sink, and one of the early stories is probably, it's not Sam's first story that came out, but it's probably one of his earliest stories that he penciled. And one of them that came out a little later, I know, was one of his earliest stories that he penciled, because when we were in contact, I know that was something he drew a lot earlier than a lot of other stuff that he did do.
So, just looking at it, it looks like you have a wide range of genres.
Yes.
going from the Girl and Her Dog slice of life to kind of the horror suspense. How is it writing with that width of a in that wide spectrum of different book or comics?
Yeah, I think I've written, I've got in that on that crowdfunder, I have like slice of life, I've got horror, I've got science fiction, I've got fantasy, I've got comedy, I've got superheroes. Pretty much almost any genre you can think of, I've probably taken a knock at. But I just like writing, and just whatever the story takes me. I'm not like, I can only write a mystery or science fiction or whatever. I get bored, I guess, kind of easy, and I like to keep moving on, and just writing whatever strikes my my interest at that time, and it keeps things. I have a knock on wood. I really haven't ever had writer's block. I've had stories where I kind of get stuck on, but I'm usually writing 2 or 3 things at one time, and they're usually like different genres or pretty different from each other. So if I get stuck on one story, I just pick up the other story and start writing it. So I can keep moving, so I don't like sit around not able to write. And then after I work on that for a little while, I usually can go back to this other story and finish it up. So it helps me to keep writing and keep myself fresh, I think, by working on different, kind of all throughout these different genres and stuff.
So I know that, every time we talk, I tell you how much I love Girl and Her Dog, but I don't think I've ever asked you kind of what was the inspiration for that story. And I know that you have a black lab,
Yes.
and So
yeah, I'm surprised she hasn't jumped up here yet, because usually whenever I get on a podcast, she likes to get into it. But two things kind of was the inspiration for it. At the time, I had a friend that her dog had just passed away, and probably, just a few months before I kind of got the idea. And then also I kind of took some of my, before I have Wednesday, that's my dog I have now, my black lab. I had basically a mutt, and big surprise, her name was Buffy. It shows, what a fan of the show I was. But she probably passed, it's probably been about 5 years, because I waited a little bit of time before I got a new dog. I was like, I was working and I didn't want to get a new dog and not be able to, I got Wednesday after I retired. So pretty much she hasn't ever, speak of the devil, she just got here. So I haven't had to leave her home very much, by herself. But so, some of what happens in A Girl and Her Dog, here she goes, is based on when Buffy passed, like the scene where she has to have the dog put to sleep because he was too old and sick. And when she's sitting there with the dog, and when they ask her if she wants to leave, and she tells them, "No, I want to stay here and hold the dog." That was right from when I had to do the same thing with Buffy. So it was a combination, and it just, and then the title came from going back to Harlan Ellison. Because Harlan Ellison, one of his big stories is A Boy and His Dog, which the movie was based on. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of took that title from him and just changed it. One of the things I get asked, more than, a lot at comic shows is when they see the comic, the first thing they'll do is that similar to A Boy and His Dog? And it's nothing like A Boy and His Dog, because that was a big science fiction story. But, I thought the title, it was kind of a homage to Harlan, my love for Harlan's work. And I just thought the title worked so good for the book.
Now, having written it, after the passing of, your dog, was there any catharsis that you received, from getting those feelings out onto the page and kind of, expressing?
I think so, because, I've always had a dog, all my life. I've always been a dog person. So, and, when Buffy passed, it was hard. I mean, she had been, I think she passed at 16 years old. So she lasted for a while. It kind of helps you kind of, resolve some of those feelings a little bit, kind of being able to put them in a place. And it wasn't long after that, that I wrote that I ended up getting a new dog too. I think it kind of let me move past not wanting to get a new dog because, and start thinking about, okay, it's time, for me to get a new one.
Well, I know having had, dogs and losing, them suddenly or, unexpectedly. And even we had when I met my wife, she had a black lab who lived to be 16. And that was, even hard when it was obviously his time to go, but that was, very hard for both of us because he was a bigger part of her life. But,
yeah.
I had to pass that test when I met her.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And like I said, Buffy lived to 16, so she had a good, long life. But, even though part of you kind of expects it, you're not really ready for it, because when Buffy passed, I actually was working and I came home for lunch and she was just like laying on the floor, and just kind of passed out, and I had to rush her to the emergency vet. And excuse me just a second, my dog is making a mess. So I had to bring her to the vet at that time, and so you expect it, but you still don't expect it. Part of you just kind of keeps hoping that day's never going to come, though, even though it is.
And then once we've moved on, we tell ourselves we're never going to do it again. What do we do?
Yeah, and it took me about 5 years because I was like, nope, I don't want to, do it right away. I needed to, kind of compress and, wait till I was ready again.
And who was the artist on that book?
That was Hernan Gonzalez, who's actually the same artist on Alma too. And Hernan has done very well for himself. I'm very proud of Hernan's because he's working for. Oh, excuse me, I've got indigestion. I think he's working for IDW on Star Trek. So he's been doing a lot of work. He's worked for a couple other of the indie publishers, and I can't remember which ones. I don't remember if it was Oni or Boom or one of those, but he's doing he's doing Star Trek. And last time I just talked to him, he was telling me that and I don't remember if it's another Star Trek book or something else, but IDW wants him to do another book coming up too. So
nice. Well, you can always say when you guys work together again, you can say discovered by.
Yes. Well, I was thinking of that because I started working with Sam Keith before he became famous, and now I'm like, see, if you come work with me, you'll become famous.
I know when we talked last time, it was around the time that he passed, and I know that you guys just kind of drifted apart. But how did you guys meet each other and collaborate on what you collaborated on?
We did. Now this is old because I'm old, so this is a long time. This is before the internet. This is before smartphones. This is like we had to talk through landlines, and all our everything else was through the mail. But at the time there was a newspaper called the
Are you talking the 1900s?
Yeah. Pretty much. But there's a newspaper called the Comics Buyer's Guide, and it was published weekly, and that's where all of the news from comics came out. That's where Marvel and DC and later when the indies first started, like First and Pacific and those, that's where you get the news. That's where you see the new comics coming up or who was working on the comics. And in the back of it, they used to run a classified section. And I used to advertise in the classified section every week looking for artists. And that's how I was finding artists at the time. And that's how I found Sam. And we started, he wrote me and then I wrote him back. And then we started talking on the phone. And, it just developed into we both wanted to work together. And at the time, when we first started, I don't think anything of his had been published. I think one of his stories in Kamiko Primer ended up getting published, Max the Hare. And that was an early story from him. But, so we started working and, we came up with some ideas. And I'd write a script and send it to him. Then he'd send me the, copies of the artwork. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day that, I love the fact, with email and all this, you get, instant, they send it to you, you open it up, you can see everything. But there was kind of a thrill walking to the mailbox and opening the mailbox and then seeing this big envelope in there, that I seen was from Sam, and knowing that, there's artwork in there. And then just, before I even got to the house, I'm ripping it open and pulling out the pages. And it's like, seeing, the script that I just sent him, seeing it drawn, it was like, it was really cool. It was, kind of a thrill that, I still get that thrill when I see something, through email and everything, but, it was a different type of feeling when you're, having to wait, a couple weeks or so to get it through the mail and then open it up and all of that.
I too, remember a time before, the interwebs and all that good stuff. And, getting things in the mail was always, fun, but I can just imagine how it is to finally get to see some artwork on the story that you're collaborating with.
Yeah. And, we were still talking when he started getting the work, when he got Sandman, with DC Comics. That was his first really big break. And I remember him sending me copies of Sandman before it hit the newsstand. He was saying, "Here, look, here's my new comic," and he sent me like the, Xerox copies of the first issue, which was kind of cool.
So I think the first time that we spoke, it was probably close around the time of the pandemic, is when you were doing Alma.
Yeah.
Kind of, tell us a little bit about that book and if there's more coming down the line, or.
Yes, there will be more coming. That's actually the book that I signed with Source Point Press for. Alma was always, the plan for Alma was to do it like in arcs, like 3 or 4 issues, a storyline, and then do another 3 or 4 issues. Well, Source Point only publishes trades. So basically, we're going to do the first story arc, and they'll publish it as a trade. It's probably not going to be out for at least a year. But Alma was, there's two inspirations for Alma. One, of course, is Buffy, the Vampire Slayer. Because I'm a huge Buffy fan. I rewatch Buffy every couple of years. I'll just, every about 2 or 3 years, I'll sit down, put the disc. I've got all the DVDs. I'll put them in and just watch it from beginning to end. So Buffy, actually, the idea for Alma now came from Facebook. There was and I don't know what Facebook group it was, but some Facebook group had made a comment about how in fantasy stories the hero was always the young viral guy or girl, that gets the powers and goes off to fight the demons and the wizards and whatnot. And the guy made a comment about, well, what if somebody's grandma got the power? And everybody just kind of it was a joke. Everybody, all the comments were like, going, taking this as a joke and just piling on about it. But when I read it, my mind went a completely different direction. I took it seriously. And I was like, well, what if something like that happened? So, I kind of took, the basic premise of Buffy, which is also, premise of a lot of other, pieces of work, and just created Alma. And the other inspiration for it was my mom, because when I was trying to figure a name for the character, I was trying to think of, I wanted a name of something that, I thought was a strong female character, and Alma is my mom's name. So I was like, that's perfect. I'll just use my mom for that. And actually there's a little bit of my mom in the character, and, and my dad, there's, I use a little bit of there to help, with the personality. But so I published Alma first in the 24 issues, and it was before my mom passed. She actually seen it. She seen the 24 issue version of it. But then she, about a year after that came out, or maybe less than that, she passed. So the more current version of Alma now is 48 pages. It's 32 pages of comic story, because I added another little 8-page story in it, and then the rest of it is like recipes from my mom, a little diary my mom was writing, a letter page. So I basically turned it into more of a tribute to my mom, after she passed. So Alma, I don't think anything I ever write, Alma has a special meaning or special place for me, just because of that. I think A Girl and Her Dog may be some of the best writing I've ever done. And I think Alma's good, but, but Alma still, has a special, it means more to me just because of, I'm glad my mom got to see it before she passed and, see what I had created, using her name and likeness in a sense. But, I just added more to it to, make it more of a tribute to my mom.
And who is the garden gnome based on?
I would say, though, one of my biggest influences as a writer in comics is Steve Gerber, who created Howard the Duck and did a lot of work for Marvel and DC. And a lot of his work, even his serious, like his superhero work, for like, he wrote the Defenders for a good bit of time. As serious as he would write the stories, he always had some type of absurd situation or some comedy into it. And I find when I write something, I always want to throw, even if it's supposed to be very serious, I always like to throw something a little weird into the mix, or something a little humorous in it. And when I sat down to write Alma, I wanted her to have like not a watcher like from Buffy, but a companion. And in the book, I call him a companion that, somebody that kind of like can give her the 10-cent explanation for what's going on. And he's there to help, to help her fight the demons and the monsters and stuff. But when I went to create the character, I was like, well, I don't want to just create some regular person or someone that, everybody's going to expect. And I was trying to think of what could be the weirdest thing I could do. And the original concept was he was going to be a Cupid, which is Alma. It opens with a 4-page prologue from the champion that was the champion before Alma gets the powers, and her companion was the little winged Cupid. But I think at the time I had just moved into my where I'm living now, and I was doing a lot of garden work, and I was buying like different things to fit into the garden and on the yard. And I remember every time I go to the store, I'd see these little garden gnomes, for sale everywhere. They have them like in every type of thing and all that. And so when I sat down to create the character, I was like, what if I make him a garden gnome? And it just kind of, went from there.
So, without giving too much away, and if you want, can you kind of tease the project that are going to be launching
on Kickstarter? Yeah, I'm kind of, this was a project I actually had got more planned ahead of myself than any other project. And I've actually been teasing it on Facebook, on social media for like the last month. This is vampires versus zombies. And I've been putting it out. I'd been teasing it for like I said, the last month and a half, and telling everybody, it's gonna come out July 1st. It's gonna come out on July 1st, and it's going to be at least a month before we can make, probably closer to 2 months before I think we get to it. There's a few Kickstarter flagged us on a couple things, and there's some other things we just have to take care of before we can move on. So, but I think this is by the same artist, Jorge Gaibapeto, who did the art for Akimi for me, and I think it's two vampires and zombies are really big in comics. I was surprised that I haven't seen this pairing of the two in comics yet. Now, someone will come up and show me that, they've already fought here or something, but I haven't seen, the vampires and zombies. So this is an idea I've had for years. Actually, Hernan and I started to do this story about 5 years ago, and we just never got too far. Hernan did about 5 or 6 pages of art for it, and we just never really finished it. So, and he's just not in no position to do it now. So I found a new artist. Oh, excuse me. And he, like I said, the premise of the vampires and the zombies I've had for like I said, years. And then the main character is Enoch, who is the monster hunter, and he's a character I've had probably for even longer than that. I've just never had the right story to fit him into. And when I created the vampires versus zombies, he fit into this world really easy. So he's the plan is to do a 4-issue story arc with the vampires versus zombies, and then do another story with Enoch that may fight some other type of demon or monster. For like the next 4 issues. At the core though of the storyline, it's a lot of fighting, a lot of vampires and the zombies fighting each other, Enoch blowing them apart and killing them. But there's actually more of a core to the story, and the core of the story is actually is about motherhood. It's going to revolve around like motherhood. So it's there's a little bit more to it than just the fighting and everything else, which is cool. And I think that's what's going to draw people in. But hopefully, there's a little more to the storyline.
Yeah, well, I think you pretty much answered my next question, which was what even though again I can't think of any vampire versus zombies either, but I was going to ask what were you hoping to bring to the genre that is either lacking or hasn't been
Yeah, I think.
without giving too much away, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. Like I said, there's a the backbone or the core of the story is going to be a story about motherhood, which so you know I think there'll be something into the story than just a lot of fighting and whatnot. But you're going to see a lot of vampires, a lot of zombies. I think Enoch is going to be is a cool character. Uh, if anybody knows their Bible or their Bible history, Enoch is actually a character as a person from the Bible. He's Methuselah's father, and he was supposed to have been such a good man that God decided that He didn't want to wait for him to die. He took him up to heaven before he died. So he's never died. He's just went straight to and this is that Enoch, but he's come back to Earth like centuries ago to fight monsters and demons and whatnot.
I can't wait to find out more about that because that does sound very interesting.
Yeah, I'm kind of upset like the whole thing, and I'm more upset with myself because I've built up this everybody about this just the premise or you built it up before it came out, and now I've just got to wait. But not much I can do. So we're gonna like I said, the plan is hopefully within no more than 2 months we can get everything taken care of and we can get this book on Kickstarter. And it actually may work out better because it'll be out closer to October. Putting it out around Halloween may be a better way to go.
So we've talked about your slice of life stuff. We've talked about your kind of supernatural horror stuff. Tell us about some of your you're dabbling into the comedic side of writing.
Probably I've got two things. I think my two biggest comedic stories. One is Joe Bushkin, who is I don't know how many people are familiar with Hunter S. Thompson anymore. He was a writer for Rolling Stone, a political writer. He wrote a lot of about politics during the 70s for Rolling Stone. They've actually made a couple movies about him. Johnny Depp.
Fear and Loathing.
Yeah, and then I think where the Buffalo Roam or something. Johnny Depp played him in one of the movies. I know.
Well, it was Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Oh, was that the one? Okay.
Which is an awesome movie. Just
yeah. And Hunter S. Thompson is he's credited to creating gonzo journalism, where basically he puts himself into the story, But if you've never read any of his work, it's worth going back and reading. He wrote a book about the Hells Angels. He's got Fear and Loathing on the I don't remember what it was on Fear and Loathing on the Political Trail or something like that, where he talked about the 72 presidential election. But he's a really good writer. I mean, he is, of course, most of what he's writing about is a little dated now because it's all in the 70s and 80s. But so Joe Bushkin, though, is what if Hunter S. Thompson retired, moved to Florida, and became a Republican? And he also has the face of a pig. So and he dresses like in the like a typical American tourist, with the flowered shirt, the Hawaiian type shirt, shorts, the big socks and sandals, and I think it was pretty funny. We did one issue of it. I was always hoping to do more with the character. but then the other one, which we've done 2 issues of, or 2 books with these characters, and we're working on a third, is 2 Tons of Fury. The 2 main characters in it are all the characters in this book are from public domain, from like the past. The 2 main characters are Herbie the Fat Fury and Fat Man the Human Flying Saucer. So with those 2 characters, it can't be a very serious book, So and it's not, we're the first issue we did. The first issue actually started because the artist on it is Larry Gidry, a local artist here, a friend of mine. He was doing covers, imaginary covers that he was selling on eBay. He's a big fan of comics from the '60s, like Justice Society and the old Justice League. And he was doing covers, imaginary covers featuring those characters, and was putting on eBay. Well, he did a cover featuring Herbie and Fat Man, and he put it on eBay. And I seen the cover, and I was like, and he had been after me for a while. He kept telling me, we got to do a story with Herbie in it. We got to do a Herbie book. And I kept going, no, I don't want to do it. Well, when I seen this cover, it was like, all right, we're going to do a book. I said, this cover is just too good. And so we've got those 2 characters in it. We have a character called Billy Bounce, who was from I think he was a comic strip back in 1904. He's actually was created by the artist that drew, or that didn't draw, but illustrated the first Wizard of Oz story. He created Billy Bounce, and Billy Bounce was kind of a forerunner of Bouncing Boy from Legion of Superheroes. He just blew himself up and he bounced around. So he's in the story. There's a Captain Marvel in the story that's not the Marvel version or the DC version. Back in the '60s, there was a character called Captain Marvel. He was an android that he would yell "split" and his body would like fall apart. And then we
I did the same.
Yeah, and we've got a few other characters in there from the public, from the time. But it's a cool little story, I think. We've also did a story where the 2 Tons of Fury meet Tomorrow Girl from Antarctica Press. Because actually Ben Dunn, because I publish everything on Facebook. When I start doing a story, I start putting pages and stuff. Ben Dunn from Antarctica Press had seen the pages that I was putting up for 2 Tons when we first started doing it, and he liked it. He actually printed the first comic too. He had printed 2 Tons in one of his anthology books, and then he wanted us to do a story where they met Tomorrow Girl. So we did a story where they met Tomorrow Girl, and in that story we bring in Atomic Mouse, and I don't remember who else right now, but I remember we did introduce Atomic Mouse from the 50s too in there. Now we're working on a new story with them where 2 Tons of Fury meet Cthulhu. So this one's going to be very weird. It's not going to be a Cthulhu most people have read about or seen.
So, as like we said, your writing spans the spectrum of genres. Do you find one, more challenging to write, one more easier to write, or is it, you're, as you said, you're writing something, you think of another thing, or you figure out how to move this other story along, and you just go that way?
Yeah, I don't, everything sometimes has its, issues, and, sometimes, but once I get into the story, I usually, it kind of clicks. Probably the hardest thing for me to start was, like I said, the 2 Tons book, because Larry he's a big fan of Herbie, and he'd been wanting to do a Herbie book, and I was just like, I didn't really want to get into the public domain characters, because one, you really can't copyright them. They're, you put them out there, they're not really your characters. But, I just kept putting it off for a while. But then once I started writing it, it kind of started clicking. But Herbie was a character though I've had trouble, or it's hard for me to write because Herbie is such a weird character. His speech and just the way he acts. But you know, so everything. Sometimes I may like hit a roadblock when I'm in the middle of something. I'm not a I don't I when I write I don't like compose outlines, and I don't know, basically when I start writing, I know the beginning of the story, and sometimes I know the end of the story, and I don't always know the end of the story. And I just kind of start writing. I get the characters, I know where I want to begin, and then I just start writing. And I usually have like points in between that I think, okay, I'll do this and this and this. But even that changes, like I'll be like, okay, well, this is what was supposed to happen, but now I've decided to take a right turn instead of that left turn, and I'm adding something else, or things are changing on me. I kind of like giving myself that freedom where I don't lock myself into like, okay, this is what you planned out, so this is what you have to write. Because as I write, the characters, I mean, I know it's a kind of a cliche, but as I write, the characters kind of come to life for me, and I kind of start seeing more of how I think they would react, or maybe what should happen, and it gives me that freedom. I think it keeps the story fresher too than getting myself locked into doing something that, even though I think, well, that may not be right now, but nope, it's on the outline, so I have to put it in.
Now, having been a indie creator, for I don't know how many years, but since before the internet.
Yeah. I don't say how many years, because then I really feel old.
How has, let me see if I can phrase this correctly. How has, things as an indie creator and someone, not, writing for one of the big publishers, how has that, evolved for you and forced you to evolve in what you do to get, the word out and, your writing and everything?
Yeah, I think in some ways, I think it's gotten easier to, because you see a lot more people self-publish nowadays than, I mean, you still had people self-publishing back when I first started, because you have Dave Sim doing Cerebus, you had, Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman doing the Turtles, but you didn't see, it wasn't as big a movement. The people that were self-publishing were fairly, a smaller group, but now it's seems like there's a lot more self-publishing, more people. Seems to be easier to get the book printed and published and out there. The biggest thing is just getting word out about it. So I mean, but that was a problem back then too. It was but Diamond was a little easier to get into at the time, I think. For publishers. Then later, it became a lot harder to, especially if you were a smaller publisher, to get into Diamond. And now, of course, there is no Diamond, but it's, because in the beginning, I published one book before 2000, like right towards the end of the 90s. We published 2 issues of a comic called Diebold, which is where I actually got the name for the company from. And then we just kind of didn't go any further with it. And it wasn't until probably, the mid 2000s, 2006, 2007, where I decided to, start self-publishing myself. And at the time I didn't have a brand. I just kind of self-published under my name. I just, like on the back of my comics, when I published them, I'd put John Holland, and the comic or whatever, which the only cool thing about that was they actually, I don't know if it's like some B movie called Santa Jaws, which nobody's probably ever heard of. It's like some monster movie with a crazy shark or something where he gets a Santa hat on his head or something. Well, they filmed parts of it in New Orleans, and the main character was this kid, a teenager that was a comic book fan. Well, my local shop is where they filmed all the comic book scenes in it. Was at the shop I was at, Well, so they wanted, of course, a background of comic books. Well, they didn't want to use Marvel or DC or any of the names where somebody might, hey, you can't put my comic in your movie. So basically, when the kid was at the newsstand, they had this, they moved the racks up closer, and at that time, I think I had about maybe 10 books or whatever, and they put all my comics behind them. So you've seen all the comics. And at one point, the kid was laying in bed reading one of my comics, and you see it like, he's holding the comic up, and you see the cover of the comic, but you see the back of the comic with my name on it. So my name actually appeared in the movie. So that was kind of cool. But I figured I needed a brand. I needed to brand all these comics under one thing. So I kept trying to come up with a name for the company until I finally just kind of thought, well, Diebold, kind of break it up and make it 2 words. I like that. That's kind of a striking name. It's kind of cool. So that's what I ended up going with.
So if I were to strand you on a desert island and only let you take 5 things to read, and I'll be nice and allow you to have complete runs of like say an artist, writer, artist. What are you taking with you, and why?
That's tough. One of the books that I might take right now, one of my favorite books. Now this depends on how it ends too, because they haven't finished the series. Is, and I always get the title wrong. What's the Furthest Place from Here by Matthew Rosenberg and Tyler Boss, I think. That I'm in love with that book. That book is just so cool. It's just so good. It's got, I think there's 4 trades out. I think there's going to be probably enough to do one more trade, and then they're going to end it. That I probably would bring, unless they really just screw the ending and really make it, unless they pull a Lost and make it terrible. Because, Lost was one of those TV shows that I loved until the ending. And now after that ending, I can't go back and watch Lost. But so that would probably be one of them, because like I said, I love that book. That book has just become probably one of my favorite books. Probably Saga. Saga I enjoy reading. That's Love and Rockets. Love and Rockets I think is the best comic book published right now. Probably in the last 2 decades. That's probably, or even longer than that. Now it's been out longer. Love and Rockets is like, I think the top of what comics can be. That would definitely I'd have to bring with me. Even though they still publish, they still do it, but I think it's on a quarterly schedule now, so it doesn't come out as much. But when Love and Rockets first came out, and when they were publishing that magazine every, I don't know if it was every bi-monthly or monthly or whatever it was. I mean, even now they're creating work that is just like so good. So I would have to definitely Love and Rockets. I would have to bring with me. Wow, what else? That's only 3, so I got 2 more. I'm not sure what the other 2. At one time, it would have been Cerebus, but that was another book that really lost its way. I felt like towards the end. Could be Mage by Matt Wagner. That's a book that I think has stood the test of time. It stood like he did 3 different versions of it. The 3 Mage 1, 2, and 3. Mage I really enjoyed a lot. Who knows? Maybe I'm a big fan of Absolute Wonder Woman. I think Absolute Wonder Woman is amazing right now. Most of the Absolute line I've been enjoying a lot. But Absolute Wonder Woman has been doing really well. So that could end up being one of those books that I go back to and really enjoy.
We just had Kelly Thompson on two episodes ago talking her new Buffy series and some Wonder Woman.
Yes, I'm looking forward to her Buffy series. Yeah, her Wonder Woman is awesome. I liked when she did Hawkeye, and then West Coast Adventures. I've been a fan of her for a while. I think she's an amazing writer. Uh, she's done some really good work, and absolutely, most of the Absolute line I've been enjoying, but Absolute Wonder Woman I think just blows everything else away. Now, Absolute Manhunter was really good too, but I really do like Absolute Wonder Woman. It's been really good.
And where do how do you keep yourself inspired, or how do you keep, where do you, I guess, look to for the next idea, or what do you consume to feed yourself as a creator?
Just reading, watching movies, TV. I don't watch as many movies, but like TV. Just looking at history, sometimes looking at what's going on, current events. Something can spark something. I read a lot of nonfiction. I like to read. I read fiction, a lot of fiction. Like, one of my favorite writers is Michael Connelly, the creator of the character Bosch, the detective that they had the TV show and everything. But I also read like a lot of nonfiction, a lot of history, current events. Because I always say, you can get your ideas from anywhere. Really, an idea is the easy part. It's what you take that idea and what you do with it is, sometimes the hard part. I could be reading a book and just something in that book, in another comic, and what they'll do will make me think about, well, what would happen if instead of it going this way, what if it went another way? And that might give me an idea for a whole different thing. So yeah, I get ideas everywhere. I can get an idea driving down the street, and just thinking, or I got an idea for a story. I had an artist, but it didn't work out. But I was driving, listening. When I drive, a lot of times I'll listen to podcasts. That seems to be my favorite time to listen to a podcast is when I'm in the car, because I guess I can concentrate more on the podcast. And it was actually Matthew Rosenberg. I don't remember what he even said now. He was being interviewed, and he was talking about one of his books or something about writing, and he said something, and I don't remember what he said now, but when he said it, my mind said, oh, wait a minute, what about this? And it sparked an idea that I didn't know what to do with. I mean, basically, I just took that idea and put it to the side. I went home, wrote like a page of it, and then just put it to the side because I didn't really have anything to go with it. I just had this idea of this scene, basically. But then when I read another book called Murderland, which is a book about serial killers, and that kind of got me thinking about a different idea, which I was able to take that idea that I had before, and I was like, oh, these two things kind of work together now. And it just, it kind of started this whole idea about this other series that I'm kind of playing around with. I haven't really went too far with it yet.
A serial killer and his dog.
Yeah. You never know.
So, what advice, given your time that you've put in as a indie creator, what's the best piece of advice you could give to someone who is thinking about, going down this path, or who is maybe struggling?
There's a few. I think first, have thick skin. You've got to be able to take rejection. When I first started writing, I was writing short stories for science fiction and fantasy, and I used to have a file cabinet, and that file cabinet, I had a whole drawer of that file cabinet full of rejection letters. It's like it'd be like I'd send the story out, rejected, send the story out, rejected, but I never stopped sending the story out or sending these stories out. So you've got to have thick skin. You can't, I know it's hard when people say don't take the rejection personally, because part of me does, because it's like, well, I just got rejected. How can I not take that personally? But you can't take it you don't want to write the editor and say, why did you reject this? You're an idiot. This is the best thing since sliced bread.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to have thick skin. I always say you have to have a healthy ego, but you can't have an ego so big that you get pissed off, or you start wondering, thinking all these people are idiots or whatever that don't see your brilliance. And you have to keep working at it. If you really want to do it, you have to sit down and make time. Most people don't do this as a full-time job. I worked in retail all my life when I was trying to write. Retail can be a rough thing because retail,
so crushing.
Yes, very much. And I used to work like 50 to 60 hours a week. It's they expect you to be, especially when you're in management. You're usually salaried, so they expect you to put in a lot of time. Retail, especially the last 25 years when I worked there, they basically their idea of saving money is to cut employees and not have very many people working there and expect the salary people to take up the slack. So it could be hard to find time to write, but you've got to carve out those little spots, either write on the weekends on your day off, write in the morning early, write when you come home. Even if you only write for 30 minutes or an hour, at least you're getting something done. If you really want to do it, you have to find time to do it. And I always say, don't give up. Just keep doing it. Keep working at it. The more you do it, the more you write, the better you'll get. There's a saying that for an artist to get, to really draw good, he has to draw 1,000 bad drawings. Well, it's kind of the same thing as a writer. To get good, you probably have to write 1,000 bad pages. I can look back at when I first started and now, and I think I'm a lot better writer. I know how to write better than I did when I first started. When I first started, it would be hard for me to just sit down and start trying to write something. I would struggle sometimes with coming up with the idea or what to do with it, especially if I wanted to write something long. Short stories were easy to write, a 5-page or an 8-page. But when I tried to write a 24-page or 20 pages, that was hard. But now I find I can sit down and write out that 24 pages without worrying about it or thinking about it too much. So I said you have to have a healthy ego, but you don't want to have an overbearing ego.
Well, we're at the part of the show where you get to what's the word I'm looking for? Pitch whatever you have. Pitch your crowdfunding. Pitch yourself, your socials, and all that.
Well, I have a Fund My Comic out right now, the Diebold Comics digital library. It's got 16 single issues and 3 trades. Single issues are $5. The trades are $10. All the books are done. They're 100% done. When the campaign is over, you don't have to worry about us sending them to the printer. You don't have to worry about the shipping, us having to ship them to you. So you'll get the books, as quick as I can, write up the emails and send them out. So, you should get the books within a week, 2 weeks at the tops if I'm just lazy getting the stuff out. But, my plan is to get this stuff out to everybody as quick as possible. Pretty much everything we've talked about on the show is on the crowdfunder. A Girl and Her Dog, Alma, 2 Tons of Fury, Joe Bushkin, Robot Sex, Snapshots. A lot of books, all different genres. Everything is at least 24 pages. A lot of the books are longer. Some of them are 36, some are 48. The trades all are 4 issues at least in each trade. One of them, I think, is 5 issues in the trade. So I think it's a really good deal. You can buy everything, which is like, when you add in the trades and stuff, was like 24, would be 24 single issues or 28 single issues, which comes to like $1.85 a comic. You buy all of it for $50. So it's really, I think, a really good deal. I've got a new, like we were talking about briefly, I've got a Kickstarter coming out in another couple months, Vampires versus Zombies. I think it's going to be really cool. It's got some really great art in it. You can find me at see underneath my name at my Substack, jholland.substack.com. I write a little about everything on there. I write about, like, writing tips and how I did some, created some of the stories. I write about, I've actually printed some of my comics on there so you can get previews of them. Or write personal stuff on there. It's like Substack has been really pretty cool to work with. I've tried to find like a sites before. I've had a website, I had a Patreon, I've had this and that, and for some reason nothing has ever stuck. But the Substack has been doing really pretty well. Everything is free. There is no paywall, so I don't like start writing something and then in the middle of when just it starts to get good, it says now you have to pay for this. Everything is free. Now I do have a tier. You can, if you like what I'm doing, you can, subscribe. I think for $5 a month, to help me out, to help me keep paying these artists and printing costs and everything else, because it gets expensive really quick. But so yeah, the Substack, you can see it's got a little of all sorts of writing on it from me. So, and then I'm on every social media. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Threads and Blue Sky and Instagram, either under my name or under Diebold Comics. I'm there.
Are you on MySpace?
I used to be. I was. When MySpace was really big, I actually had a music blog out at it. Then I also had a blog too. That's back in the day. But I had a music blog where I would, talk about a lot of new, smaller indie musicians, and MySpace was perfect for that because a lot of musicians, posted on MySpace, and you could get hold of them so much easier. You could just message them, and I got hold of so many people that I interviewed and stuff like that through MySpace. It was, I fought against Facebook at first. I did not want to go to Facebook. I was like, I'm MySpace, no Facebook. But then eventually, there wasn't a choice.
And I think the last time we talked to you just about, I forget the name of the book, but it was like a book that kind of looked at Stephen King's works.
Yeah. Oh crap! I just it was they created Maine. One of the colleges up there created a chair, a Stephen King chair. And the professor that was there that taught, like I think she teaches 2 Stephen King classes, at the college. She wrote a book. She went back and kind of she got access to all of Stephen King's writing, like his drafts, his notes, all of that, and she picked like I think 5 or 6 books of his, and basically just kind of wrote about, how the book started, how it changed, and things like that. I haven't quite finished it yet. I think I'm down to the last, half of it or less, and it's been interesting to her. She would talk about this is how the book started and how it changed over time. She read some of the early drafts of it. I'm surprised he had a few more than as fast as Stephen King writes. You'd think he wrote off of his first draft, because he puts out 2 or 3 books a year, but he actually writes, multiple drafts of all his books.
Well, John, it is always a pleasure to catch up with you, and definitely when the Kickstarter, is ready to launch, would love to, get back with you and kind of get more details on that and
Definitely.
the plans for that. But yeah, like I said, always a pleasure to talk to you, and always, glad to, hear what you have, the stories you have to tell. And I will one of these days stop asking you to talk about a girl and her dog. But again, that's
I'm glad you like it. Like I said, I think it's probably the best thing I've ever written. There's other things sometimes like, Alma that may mean a little different to me, but it's hard to pick out what you think is your best story. But Girl and Her Dog just really worked for me. So I'm glad you like it, and it's a pleasure being here. I enjoy talking to you, and I will definitely let you know when the Kickstarter is ready to drop.
Yep. And as my co-host Matt likes to say, the world these days could be a pretty crappy place, but do something good. Support a local business, support a local artist, support local music.
Yes.
Just don't be a jerk.
Yes.